My son called my name and asked me to cancel my doctor's appointment, the one I'd waited 3 weeks for, and I froze. He said it so casually, like he was asking me to pick up milk from the store. "Mom, could you skip your appointment on Thursday? We really need someone to watch the kids." For a few seconds, I didn't answer. I just stood by the counter, my hand resting on the little plastic pill case I'd filled the night before. Monday through Sunday, everything in its place: blood pressure pills, cholesterol tablet, the vitamin D my doctor said was helping my bones. That appointment wasn't just any checkup. It was the follow-up for the medication that had been making me dizzy for a week. The nurse had told me, "Don't skip this one, Mrs. Pullen. We'll need to check your levels." I even printed the reminder email and taped it to the fridge door, so I wouldn't forget. 3 weeks I'd been waiting. But when your grown child asks for help, it's a reflex. You start to say yes before your brain even catches up. Roger's voice was friendly, quick, just like always. "It's just for the morning. Madison's daycare's closed, and I've got a client meeting downtown. Could you help out?" Could I help out? He didn't sound like a man asking for a favor. He sounded like someone checking an item off a list, assuming Mom will cover it. I stared at the fridge door, at the reminder paper curling at the corners. My hand felt cold. If you've ever had to choose between doing something for yourself or doing it for family, you know that tight, sinking feeling in your chest, like guilt and love pulling at opposite ends of a rope. I said I'd call him back. I needed a minute. After I hung up, I walked to the kitchen window. The sky over Seattle was the kind of gray that never quite turns into rain. My little street in Shoreline was quiet, just a mail truck humming down the block. I could see my bus schedule pinned near the sink. The 3:48 to the clinic left at 9:10. I'd planned to be there early, maybe grab a coffee at the corner cafe before seeing the doctor. That morning had been organized in my mind for days. What I'd wear, how I'd pay for the copay, even what I'd make for lunch after. It felt like a small promise to myself. But now my thoughts started spinning. Maybe I could reschedule. Maybe I could get an afternoon slot. I checked the patient portal. The next available date was 2.5 weeks away. I sat at the table and sighed. That's when the memory of the first time he'd asked came rushing back. It was last year, right before Christmas. I had an appointment to check my blood sugar levels. Roger had called early that morning in a hurry. "Mom, can you watch the kids for a few hours?" Jenna's meeting got moved. I remember saying yes before I even thought about it. The doctor's office had to move my appointment to January. No big deal. I told myself then. The kids needed me. I was proud to be needed. But later that night, as I set out my pill case, I realized I'd run out of one of my medications and didn't notice because I'd missed the refill reminder. My head had been so full of their schedules, their errands, their needs. That was the first seed of resentment I never wanted to admit I felt. I love those grandkids more than anything, but I've learned that love doesn't erase exhaustion. And it doesn't stop the quiet question in your mind. When is it my turn to matter? Back to the present, I looked at my notes for Thursday, the address, the lab order, the time. I traced my finger over the paper. 69 years old and still afraid of letting people down. When Roger was little, I worked 2 jobs. One at the post office, another cleaning offices at night. I never missed a day because I couldn't afford to. I used to tell him, when you make a promise, you keep it. I guess I didn't expect that one day I'd have to remind myself of my own rule. My phone buzzed. A message from Roger. "So, can I tell Jenna you're good for Thursday? She's trying to plan her meeting." He didn't mean harm. I know my son. He's a good man. He works hard, provides for his family, and I'm proud of him. But somewhere along the line, helping became expected instead of appreciated. I started to type back. Let me see what I can do, but I stopped. I took a sip of water, looked at the clock, 4:10 in the afternoon. The bus for my appointment would be leaving in less than 40 hours. I should have felt sure about keeping it. Instead, guilt crept in again. Why does it feel selfish to take care of ourselves? Why do mothers, even grandmothers, still put everyone else first? I thought of my neighbor, Marcus, who'd once told me, "Doris, your body's the house you live in. Don't skip the repairs." He was right. I put my phone face down and opened the folder the clinic had given me. There was the pamphlet about managing high blood pressure. Right under it, the lab slip I needed for Thursday. It felt heavy in my hand, not the paper, but the meaning of it. I stood up, walked to the fridge, and looked again at that appointment notice. I whispered, "You're keeping it." And just saying that out loud made me feel a little taller. My heart slowed down. The kitchen clock ticked softly. I picked up my phone again, not to reply to Roger yet, but to check the weather forecast for Thursday. Cloudy, 58 degrees, good enough to wear my blue sweater, the one I call my lucky one. Then I set a reminder on my phone, doctor's appointment, do not cancel. It felt small but powerful, like drawing a line in the sand only I could see. I knew this wouldn't be the last time Roger asked, but maybe for once I could practice saying no before life gave me another reason to regret it, because taking care of your family shouldn't mean forgetting to take care of yourself. And if you've ever had that same choice sitting heavy in your chest between your own needs and someone else's emergency, you know exactly what I felt standing in that kitchen that day. The bus schedule stayed where it was. The appointment card stayed on the fridge. And I told myself softly, not this time. After I told myself, not this time, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But habits don't change overnight, especially the kind built on love and guilt. The truth is, this wasn't the first time Roger had asked me to skip something important. It had become a pattern, one I hadn't noticed until I started looking back. The first time was last spring. I had a dental appointment scheduled to fix a crown that had been bothering me for weeks. Nothing serious, but the kind of dull ache that keeps you from enjoying a sandwich. That morning, just as I was lacing up my shoes, the phone rang. "Mom, are you busy today?" Roger's voice had that upbeat tone he uses when he's about to ask for something. The babysitter canceled. "I'll owe you big time." I remember glancing at the clock. My appointment was at 10. The dentist's office was only 15 minutes away, but I could already feel my plans slipping through my fingers. He said, "It's just for a few hours, until Jenna gets off early. You're the only one I trust with the kids." That line always did me in, the only one I trust. It made me feel needed, special. I told him, "All right, just this once." By the time I called to cancel, the receptionist had already given my slot to someone else. She said the next available opening was 2 months away. I hung up and told myself, it's fine. But later, when I bit into a piece of toast and felt that sharp sting, it didn't feel fine at all. The second time was midsummer, about 6 months later. I had a mammogram scheduled, a follow-up from an earlier scan. Nothing alarming, just a precaution. I'd already rearranged my grocery delivery and laid out my clothes the night before. Then, the night before the appointment, my phone buzzed again. "Hey, Mom, any chance you can watch the kids tomorrow?" Jenna's boss called a last-minute meeting. I hate to ask again. He always said that. I hate to ask again. I could almost predict every word. The tone, the little pause before again, the way he'd say, "We'll make it up to you." I should have said, "No, Roger, I have something important tomorrow." But I didn't. I hesitated, like I always did, picturing those little faces, Liam and Zoe, and I said, "Sure, I can help." The next morning, I sat in their living room watching cartoons, while my appointment reminder dinged softly on my phone. I silenced it and told myself I'd call the clinic later. When I finally called the receptionist side and said they were booked for the next 3 weeks. That evening, when I got home, there was a half-finished bowl of soup on my kitchen counter. I'd left it there when Roger called. It had gone cold, the surface thin with film. I remember staring at it and feeling like that soup, something once warm, now forgotten. Then came the third time, the one that really got to me. It was just 2 months ago. My doctor had asked me to stop by the blood pressure clinic for a routine check. Nothing fancy, just a walk-in at the local community center. I'd been doing well, but my readings were creeping higher. The nurse had told me to stay on top of it. That morning, I'd set my purse by the door and made a cup of tea. My plan was to go to the clinic, stop by the farmer's market, and pick up fresh berries. But before I finished my tea, my phone rang again. Roger's voice was soft but hurried. "Mom, you busy? We've got a plumbing issue, water everywhere. Could you stay with the kids while we wait for the plumber?" It was like my week had a script I didn't write, but kept performing in any way. I said, "Roger, I have an appointment this morning." He paused, then said, "It's just blood pressure, right? That can wait, can it?" That line hit me like a cold splash of water. That can wait. I hung up after saying I'd think about it. I sat at my table, staring at the steam from my tea fading away. The nurse's words echoed in my head. "Stay consistent, Doris. Skipping check-ins isn't good for your progress." That was the day I realized how easily love can be mistaken for endless availability. Later that evening, my daughter Sylvia called. Unlike her brother, she doesn't assume I'll always say yes. She's a nurse herself, lives across town, and knows what missed appointments can mean. She asked, "Mom, did you ever get your blood pressure checked?" I told her what happened. She let out that small sigh she always does when she's holding back words. "Mom, you can't keep doing this. You raised us already. You can still help, but not at the expense of your health." I laughed it off, said, "It's not a big deal." But she didn't laugh. "No, Mom, it is. We both see it. Roger just doesn't realize he's turning you into his safety net." That night, I lay in bed replaying every favor, every just this once, and every "I owe you." The truth was, I couldn't remember the last time Roger had asked about my appointments or whether I'd gone. The times I'd canceled, no one noticed but me. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that I'd trained everyone to think I was always available, always fine, always the one who'd figure it out. And maybe that's how these things happen. Not in one big moment, but in small, quiet choices where you keep saying yes because it's easier than explaining why you can't. By the time I reached that realization, I could feel the weight of it in my body, the tiredness, the tightness in my chest, the ache in my knees after a long day with the kids. That week, I promised myself that the next time I had something important for me, I wouldn't move it for anyone. Promises become patterns, but patterns can be broken. When you've spent your life putting others first, saying no isn't just a word. It's a new language you have to learn. And I was ready to start learning. Friday afternoon started quiet, the kind of slow, gray day Seattle is known for. I'd just finished folding laundry and had a cup of tea cooling beside me. I was planning to spend the rest of the day getting ready for my appointment on Monday, the one I promised myself I wouldn't move this time. I had my notes from the clinic sitting on the table. My doctor wanted to go over my blood pressure chart and talk about the new medication I'd started a few weeks earlier. It had been making me dizzy in the mornings, and she wanted to adjust the dosage. I'd already printed my bus route, laid out my insurance card, and even chosen what I'd wear. My blue sweater, comfortable shoes. Everything was in order. Then my phone lit up on the counter. "Roger." I hesitated before answering. Somehow I already knew. "Hey, Mom," he said, a little too upbeat. "Listen, I'm in a bind." I smiled to myself without meaning to. That was his go-to phrase. I'm in a bind. Every time I heard it, it meant my plans were about to change. What's going on? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He sighed. Jenna's team got picked for a client pitch in Bellevue. It's a big deal, but our sitter just canceled. Could you skip your appointment Monday and watch the kids? Just this once. Just this once. I stared at the window while he talked. The light outside had turned the sky into that dull silver color that makes everything look flat. My tea had gone cold again. He said it like it was nothing, like a doctor's appointment was something I could rearrange as easily as moving dinner. Roger, I said quietly, this is the third time you've asked me to cancel an appointment. There was a pause. I know, Mom. I really do. But this is important for Jenna's job. We're stretched thin right now. You're such a lifesaver when you help out. A lifesaver. Another word that sounds like praise, but really means available. I rubbed the edge of my teacup. My heart was beating faster than I liked. I thought about that dizzy spell I'd had last week, the one that nearly sent me sliding down the porch steps. I hadn't told Roger about that, or the nurse's note on the clipboard that said, "Monitor closely. Possible side effects." I could picture the clipboard, clearly white paper, my name typed at the top, and a little red mark next to the blood pressure readings. My doctor had tapped her pen there and said, "We'll talk through these at your next visit." That visit was Monday. I turned the phone speaker on and set it on the counter so I could look through the papers. Roger kept talking, filling the silence with promises I'd heard before. "I'll make it up to you," he said. "I'll take you to that seafood place you like, the one by the water. You'd love it." I wanted to believe him, but we'd said that before too, and it never happened. I pressed my palm flat on the counter, trying to ground myself. "Roger, this appointment isn't something I can move again. I've already canceled too many." "I get it," he said quickly, though I could tell he didn't. "I just thought maybe you could check if they have another slot later in the week. You're so good with the kids, Mom. They love having you there." He wasn't wrong. I do love being with them. Watching Zoe draw pictures on the kitchen floor, hearing Liam tell me about dinosaurs. Those are moments that make me proud of the kind of grandmother I am. But love can't fix a dizzy spell or lower your blood pressure. I took a slow breath. "Roger, if I keep pushing these appointments, it's going to catch up with me. The doctor said this medicine needs close checking." Okay, he said, his tone shifting. "I just thought you might understand how much pressure we're under. You always say family sticks together." That line hit me hard, because I do say that. I've said it for years. But I never meant only one person should do all the sticking. I glanced at the clock, 4:37 p.m. The house felt heavy with silence. I thought about all the small ways I'd put myself second. The crown I still hadn't fixed. The mammogram I'd postponed. The blood pressure check I skipped. Each one small, but together they painted a clear picture. He was waiting for an answer. I thought about what Sylvia had said the last time we talked. "Mom, you've earned the right to say no without guilt." I didn't answer Roger right away. I let the quiet hang there, the kind of silence that makes people think. Finally, I said, "Roger, I love you, but I'm keeping my appointment. You'll need to find another plan for the kids." There was a long pause, then a sigh. "All right, Mom, I'll figure something out." I could hear the disappointment in his voice. It stung, but it also freed me a little. After we hung up, I stood by the window for a long time. The light outside was fading, and the neighborhood looked still. I felt torn between relief and sadness. The relief came from finally standing my ground. The sadness came from knowing he didn't understand why it mattered so much. I sat at the table and picked up my tea again. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. Sometimes you just finish what's in front of you, even when it's not warm anymore. I looked over at the appointment slip and ran my fingers across it. My name, the date, the time, 10:15 a.m. Monday. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was a promise to myself. For years, I thought being a good mother meant being endlessly available. But maybe being a good mother now means showing your grown children how to take care of themselves and how to let you take care of yourself too. The house felt quiet again, and I found myself whispering, "This time, I mean it." I didn't know then that this small act, keeping that appointment, would set off a chain of events I couldn't predict. But sometimes the smallest choices change the rhythm of everything that comes after. And this time, I was ready to let that change begin. Monday morning came quietly, but my mind was steady for once. I woke before the alarm, sat up in bed, and reminded myself what day it was, the day I'd been putting off too long. The house was still, just the sound of the furnace kicking on, and a light drizzle outside. I made coffee and laid out my pills on the counter like I always do, one by one. As I swallowed them, I felt a kind of calm settle over me. This time, I wasn't going to move my day around for anyone. After breakfast, I double-checked my paperwork and made sure everything was ready: ID, insurance card, and the list of questions I wanted to ask my doctor about my new medication. I'd been feeling lightheaded every morning and needed to know if it was normal or something more serious. I even called the clinic to confirm my appointment just to be safe. The receptionist answered cheerfully, "Yes, Mrs. Pullen, we have you for 10:15. Hearing my name spoken like that, as if I was someone important enough to expect, gave me a small lift. Still, there was that familiar tug of guilt in the back of my mind. Part of me worried that Roger would call again, or that I'd look at the phone and cave at the last minute. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up the phone myself and called my neighbor Marcus. Marcus is retired like me, a kind man who's lived 2 doors down for 20 years. He's helped me carry groceries a few times. I told him Roger might drop by with the kids if he can't find a sitter. If he does, could you keep an eye out for a bit? He laughed lightly. "Don't you worry, Doris. I'll handle it. You go to your appointment." Simple words, but they gave me permission I didn't even realize I needed. I put on my blue sweater, slipped my phone into my purse, and took a last look at my kitchen. The clock read 9:02. My bus would be coming soon. As I waited at the stop, a young man scrolled through his phone beside me. A woman with a walker stood a few feet away, humming to herself. Life was moving on, as it always does. The bus arrived on time. The doors opened with a soft whoosh, and I stepped inside feeling like I was doing something brave, even if it didn't look like it to anyone else. At the clinic, the lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. I checked in and sat down near the window. The waiting room was full of people like me, seniors in jackets, couples whispering to each other, one man flipping through a magazine without really reading it. Across from me, an older woman smiled and said, "These chairs haven't gotten any softer, have they?" I smiled back. Not in the 20 years I'd been sitting in them. It felt good to talk to someone who understood. We didn't exchange names, just small talk, but it was comforting. Sometimes that's all you need, someone who sees you as more than a babysitter or a favor. When the nurse finally called, "Mrs. Pullen?" I stood up quickly. For a second, I felt the dizziness again, but I steadied myself and followed her down the hallway, inside the exam room. Everything was familiar: the crinkly paper on the table, the blood pressure cuff, the faint hum of a vent above me. The nurse smiled warmly. "You've kept up with your readings, I see. That's good." I told her about the dizziness and the skipped meals when I was too busy with the grandkids. She listened carefully, jotting notes. When my doctor came in, she reviewed my chart, adjusted my medication, and looked me in the eye. "I'm glad you came in, Doris," she said. If you had waited any longer, your pressure might have gotten worse. We'll get this stabilized now." That sentence, "I'm glad you came in," hit me deep. It was validation that I'd done the right thing. For once, I'd chosen myself, and it mattered. After the appointment, I paid my copay and walked out with a lighter step. The drizzle had stopped, the sky was clearing, and I decided to take a short walk before heading home. I walked toward the waterfront near Elliott Bay, a place I used to visit when Roger was a little boy. The water had that calm, silvery look it gets after rain. A ferry was gliding in slowly, and a few seagulls called overhead. I stood there for a few minutes and just breathed. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't rushing anywhere. I wasn't waiting for someone to need me. I was just me. I bought a small cup of clam chowder from a nearby stand and sat on a bench facing the water. The warmth of it felt good in my hands. I watched the people passing by, joggers, tourists, a man feeding pigeons, and thought about how life doesn't stop when we slow down. It just becomes clearer. I walked out of that clinic and felt as though I'd reclaimed a little more of myself. That thought stayed with me as I headed back home. On the bus, I looked at the city through the window, the buildings, the traffic, the people going about their day, and I realized how long it had been since I'd done something just for me without explaining it to anyone. When I got home, my phone showed a missed call from Roger. My stomach tightened for a second, but I didn't open the voicemail right away. I put my purse down, poured a glass of water, and took my medicine. The house was peaceful. The clock ticked in its usual rhythm. Later, I played the voicemail. Roger's voice sounded rushed again, but this time different, a little unsure. "Hey, Mom. Hope your appointment went okay. I, found someone else to watch the kids. Call me when you're free." No guilt, no disappointment, just words. That was new. I smiled, set the phone down, and leaned back in my chair. Maybe this was how change started, not with a fight, but with a simple choice that showed the people around you that your time has value too. That night, I made myself a light dinner, grilled fish and steamed vegetables, and slept better than I had in weeks. It wasn't about saying no to my son. It was about saying yes to myself. And maybe for women my age, that's the lesson we all have to relearn. That choosing yourself doesn't mean you love your family less. It just means you love yourself enough to stay healthy for them. As I turned off the light, I whispered to myself, "You did it, Doris. You finally kept one promise. To you, I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but that night, I slept peacefully knowing that I'd taken back a small piece of control over my own life. And for once, that was enough. The morning after my appointment, I woke up feeling lighter. My blood pressure monitor beeped softly as I wrapped the cuff around my arm, 132/80, better than last week. I smiled, wrote the numbers in my notebook, and poured myself a cup of coffee. For once, the day felt like mine. Then my phone buzzed. One message. "Roger." The screen lit up with words that sank my stomach. "You left us in a bind. We needed you." Just 8 words, but they hit like a small stone to the chest. I read it twice, then a third time. My hand trembled a little as I set the phone down on the table. There wasn't even a question mark, just that short, flat sentence. "You left us in a bind." It was as if all the help I'd given before, every school pickup, every night of babysitting, every meal cooked when Jenna worked late, had vanished. All that mattered was this one time I said no. I sat there staring at the phone while my coffee went cold. My chest felt tight, not from my blood pressure this time, but from the sting of those words. I wanted to type back right away, something sharp, something like, "You'll survive one day without me." But my thumb hovered over the keyboard and didn't move. Instead, I found myself replaying the years of helping. The Saturdays I'd given up, the mornings I'd missed my walking group, The days I'd carried Zoe on my hip while trying to fix them lunch. I wasn't keeping score, but in that moment, I could feel every unpaid favor written across my memory. Maybe he didn't mean to sound cold. Maybe he sent it while frustrated, not thinking about how it would land. But that didn't soften the blow. I got up, opened the curtains, and looked out at the quiet street. The maple trees were starting to turn gold. It should have been a peaceful morning. But all I could feel was the ache of being misunderstood. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Sylvia. "Hey, Mom," she said, cheerful at first, then paused. "Roger called me." I sighed. I figured he might. "What happened?" she asked. He sounded irritated. "Said you didn't help with the kids yesterday." "I had my doctor's appointment, like I told him. He wanted me to cancel again." She was quiet for a moment. Then her tone softened. "He doesn't see it, Mom. He's used to you always saying yes." "I know," I said quietly, "but I'm tired of my health coming last. The doctor said if I kept putting this off, it could have gotten worse." "You did the right thing," Sylvia said. "He'll calm down. He's juggling too much and expects you to fill the gaps." "I love helping," I admitted, "but sometimes I feel invisible. Like the help only matters when it's given, not when it's withheld for a reason." "That's exactly why you have to draw lines," she said. "If you don't, nobody realizes where they're crossing them." Her words were steady, and I needed that. But after we hung up, I still felt the heaviness in my chest. I scrolled back to Roger's text, that same short message staring at me. I started typing a reply. "Roger, I love you, but my health isn't optional." Then I deleted it, typed again, deleted it again. I didn't want to sound angry. I wanted to be understood. But there's no tone in text, only interpretation. And I knew how quickly words can turn into a bigger argument. So I put the phone down and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, and Marcus was trimming his hedge. He waved. "Morning, Doris. You look better today. Must have been a good appointment." "It was," I said, but my son wasn't too happy I kept it. He shook his head, half smiling. "That's the thing about family. They get so used to you being there. They forget you've got a clock of your own." His words made me laugh, but also hit home. I did have a clock of my own, one that had been ticking quietly while I ran on everyone else's schedule. I thanked him and went back inside. That afternoon, I busied myself with little things, laundry, dishes, sorting the mail, but I couldn't shake the feeling from that text. Every time I walked past the counter, the phone would catch my eye like it was waiting for me to respond. By late afternoon, I finally typed something short. "I'm sorry it put you in a bind, but I needed that appointment. It was important for my health." Then I stared at it. My finger hovered over send. But I didn't press it, not because I was afraid of conflict, but because I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation for taking care of myself. Not anymore. I turned the phone face down. Later that evening, Sylvia called again. "Did you talk to Roger?" "Not yet," I said. "I think I'll let him think about it first." "Good," she said. Sometimes silence teaches louder than words. We talked about her day for a bit, the hospital cafeteria running out of soup again, her neighbor's new puppy, and it felt nice to talk about something normal. After the call, I fixed myself a light dinner and ate by the window. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, the kind of Seattle sunset that only lasts 10 minutes before it fades into gray again. I thought about all the times I'd answered Roger's calls without thinking, how I'd dropped everything to make his life easier, thinking that was love. But love, I realized, isn't about always saying yes. It's about being honest enough to say no when it matters. Before going to bed, I picked up the phone again. Roger hadn't texted back. The screen was blank, and that was fine. Sometimes peace comes from not replying. I plugged my phone into the charger and whispered to myself, "You did right, Doris." Then I switched off the lamp and climbed into bed. The house was quiet again, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the steady beat of my heart. I didn't know what Roger would say the next time we talked, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going backward. You can't build respect by apologizing for taking care of yourself. And maybe one day he'd understand that too. 2 days passed without a word from Roger. I wasn't angry anymore, but I could feel the distance sitting heavy in the quiet moments. The kind of quiet that follows something left unsaid. On Wednesday evening, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Roger was standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders slumped. Sylvia was behind him, holding a foil-covered casserole dish. "I brought dinner," she said, smiling softly. "Figured we could talk." Roger looked at the floor, then at me. "Can we come in, Mom?" I nodded and stepped aside. "Of course. Come on." We moved into the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of the roast I'd cooked earlier. I set out plates while Sylvia placed her casserole on the counter. Roger stood there awkwardly, jingling his car keys. "Sit down," I told him gently. "No sense talking on your feet." He obeyed like a boy again, sliding into his old seat at the table. I poured tea for everyone. One of those small things mothers do automatically, even when they're upset. For a minute, nobody spoke. The only sound was the clink of spoons against the cups. Finally, Roger broke the silence. "Mom, I'm sorry for the text." I looked at him. "You left us in a bind." He sighed. "Yeah, that one." I nodded slowly. It did hurt Roger. Not because of the words themselves, but because I felt like everything I'd done before didn't matter anymore. Like all that counted was the one time I said no. "I didn't mean it that way," he said quickly. "I was just frustrated. Jenna's boss changed her schedule last minute, and we didn't know what to do. I guess I took it out on you." Sylvia reached across and gave his hand a small squeeze. "You've been under pressure, but Mom's been carrying her own, too." He nodded but stayed quiet. I took a sip of tea and set my cup down carefully. "Roger," I said, "do you remember when you were little and got sick that winter I was working 2 jobs? I still showed up to the night shift after sitting with you all day. I kept going because I wanted you and Sylvia to grow up knowing your mother kept her word. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that keeping my word to myself matters, too." He rubbed his forehead. "I know you've always been there, Mom. I guess I assumed you wanted to help." "I do," I said. "I love being there for you and the kids. But I can't keep doing it at the expense of my health. I'm not angry. I just can't keep choosing between being a good mom and being a healthy woman." Sylvia nodded. "Exactly. She's not 20 anymore. None of us are." Roger looked at his sister. "You think I'm being selfish?" She gave him a look that wasn't unkind. "Not selfish, just blind to how much she does. You've got a good heart, Roger, but you lean on her too much." He sighed again, heavier this time. I guess I didn't see it that way. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Roger, I'm not your emergency lane. I'm not the backup plan for my own life." He blinked, a little surprised by my tone. I didn't raise my voice, but the words landed the way I meant them to. "I'm 70 next year." I continued. "I need to keep my doctor appointments, take my medicine on time, and do the things that keep me steady. Because if I don't, there'll come a day when I can't help at all. And none of us want that." He looked at me for a long time. "You're right, Mom." The air eased between us, like the tightness had finally let go. "I know I depend on you," he went on. "You've always made it easy. I didn't mean to make you feel used. I was just trying to hold everything together." "I know that," I said gently. "You're a good father, and I'm proud of you. But good parents, even grown ones, need boundaries. Otherwise, love starts to feel like obligation." Sylvia smiled, faintly. "That's true for all of us." I could feel the warmth of the teacup in my hands, steady and grounding. Here's what I think we should do, I said. From now on, if you need help, you give me at least a week's notice, unless it's an emergency. If it's last minute, you'll need to call one of your backup sitters. And if I do help, we make sure my appointments or plans don't get moved around. Roger nodded, listening carefully. That's fair. And if it's more than a few hours, I added, you cover the sitter or at least bring over dinner, so I don't have to cook after. He smiled for the first time all evening. Deal. Sylvia laughed softly. Mom's running this like a business meeting. I grinned. Maybe it's time I did. We all laughed then, and the heaviness that had filled the room began to lift. After dinner, Roger helped me clear the plates. He turned to me and said quietly, Mom, I really am sorry. I didn't realize how much I was asking of you. I'll do better. I nodded. That's all I needed to hear. Before he left, he hugged me tight. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Roger. Always will. When the door closed, Sylvia stayed behind for a bit, wiping the table. She looked at me with that knowing smile daughters sometimes have. You handled that perfectly, she said. I just told the truth, I said, and it felt good. You should write that down, she said with a laugh. Half the women I know need to hear it. After she left, I sat at the table for a long time. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, peaceful, not heavy. I looked around at the small signs of family, drawings from the grandkids pinned on the fridge, Roger's jacket still hanging on the chair, the casserole dish cooling on the counter. Everything looked the same, but something inside me had changed. For years, I'd worried that saying no would make me seem selfish. But tonight, I realized it did the opposite. It made room for real respect. I washed the dishes, humming softly, and when I finished, I turned off the kitchen light and said out loud, "That's enough for one night." For once, it really was. The next few weeks passed quietly, but something about the rhythm of my days began to feel different. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for my phone to ring before deciding what I could or couldn't do. The new rules, as Roger jokingly called them, actually worked. He'd call early in the week if they needed help, always with notice. If it was last minute, he'd say, "Don't worry, Mom, we've got the sitter lined up." That alone lifted a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. The first time he mentioned the sitter, I almost didn't believe him. It was a Thursday morning when he called. "Mom, just letting you know, Jenna's working late, but I've already got a sitter for the kids until I'm home. Didn't want you to think we'd forgotten your bridge night." My bridge night, something I hadn't attended in over a year. I smiled when I hung up. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. He was remembering my life, my time. That kind of respect feels bigger than any apology. The next week, I noticed something else. My blood pressure readings stayed steady. My nurse was happy when I came in for my checkup. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," she said. What I was doing was living without guilt, taking my pills on time, sleeping through the night, without the sound of my phone waking me for a favor. Sylvia called often, checking in more than she used to, not to talk about Roger, but about small, everyday things. A recipe she'd tried, a funny patient she met at work. She'd end each call with, "You taking your meds, Mom?" And I'd answer, "Every day like clockwork." Life wasn't perfect, but it felt balanced. One Friday, Roger stopped by unannounced. I saw his car pull into the driveway, and for a moment wondered if something was wrong. But when he came to the door, he was holding a bunch of yellow tulips. "For you," he said, handing them over. "We're sorry, Mom. I didn't see how much I was asking from you until now." I took the flowers and smiled. "Thank you, Roger. You don't have to be sorry anymore. Just keep doing what you're doing, thinking ahead." He nodded, a little sheepish. "Jenna and I talked about it. We're trying to manage better." You were right. We can't keep treating you like our safety net. I laughed lightly. Good. I've retired from that job. He chuckled too. We've noticed. He stayed for coffee, and we talked easily. He told me about the kids' school projects, how Liam was learning fractions, and how Zoe had started piano lessons. There was no tension, no awkward pauses, just conversation. It felt like having my son back, not just someone who needed something. When he left, I put the flowers in a vase and placed them on the kitchen table. Every time I looked at them that week, I felt a quiet sense of peace. Over time, those small rules we'd made stopped feeling like rules at all. They just became part of the way we treated each other, with more honesty and consideration. One Saturday morning, Roger called to tell me they were hiring a part-time helper for after-school hours. We realized it's worth the money, he said. We can't keep depending on family every time life gets busy. That's smart, I told him. It'll make your lives easier. And mine, too. He laughed. That's the plan. Hearing that made me proud. He was learning the same lesson I'd only discovered late in life. That asking for help isn't weakness, but assuming it's always available is. The following Sunday, Sylvia came over for lunch. We sat on the porch with sandwiches and iced tea. She looked at me with that same kind of sisterly pride she'd shown before. You seem lighter these days, Mom, she said. I feel lighter, I said. For years, I thought saying no meant I was letting people down. But turns out, it just taught them how to stand up on their own. She smiled. You taught me that, too. I looked out at the quiet street, the same one I'd stared at months ago feeling stuck. Now, it looked peaceful. The same street, but a different heart behind the window. I was walking more now, around the neighborhood in the mornings, sometimes down by the water when the weather was nice. My step felt steadier, my breathing easier. I could feel my body thanking me for the care I'd neglected. It's strange how something as small as keeping an appointment can shift your whole world. I'd stopped being afraid of being unavailable. And you know what? No one stopped loving me for it. In fact, Roger called one night just to talk, not to ask for anything. He told me about Zoe's school concert, how she waved from the stage looking for me in the crowd. We want you there next month, he said. We'll pick you up. No babysitting, just come enjoy it. That invitation warmed me more than I expected. It meant he saw me again. Not just as Mom the helper, but as Doris, the woman who'd raised him and still had her own life to live. That evening, I wrote in my little journal something I'd started doing again. Boundaries don't push love away. They give it a clearer path to reach you. Those words felt true. Over time, I noticed that the guilt I used to carry had been replaced with calm. When the phone rang now, I didn't tense up. If I could help, I did. If I couldn't, I said so, and nobody argued. The respect I'd always hoped for had grown quietly in the space where I'd once filled every need. It's funny how life rewards you when you finally draw your own line. That night, as I closed the blinds, I caught a glimpse of the tulips on the table. They were starting to fade, their petals curling at the edges. I replaced them the next day with fresh ones, bright and new, like the way I felt. Small changes, I thought, make the biggest difference. And I hope anyone listening to my story remembers this. Sometimes all it takes is one decision, one boundary, one not this time to change everything that comes after. Where have you drawn your line? Because once you do, you'll be amazed how much lighter your life begins to feel. Some mornings now, I sit by the window with my coffee and think about how much has changed, not around me, but inside me. Life looks the same. The same kitchen, the same street, the same rhythm of days. But I see things differently. If I could sit down with my younger self, the version of me who thought love meant never saying no, I'd tell her a few things. I'd tell her that caring for others is beautiful, but it's not meant to come at the cost of your own well-being. I'd tell her that guilt isn't love, and exhaustion isn't proof of devotion. I'd tell her that saying yes all the time doesn't make people love you more. It just teaches them to expect it. It took me almost 70 years to learn that, and I wish I'd known sooner. But maybe we only learn these lessons after life hands us the same test a few times. These days, I keep a little notepad on my fridge, not for grocery lists, but for scheduling my own time first. Doctor visits, medication refills, a walk at the park, coffee with a friend. They all go on that list before anything else. When Roger or Sylvia call, I check that list before I answer. If I can help, I do. If not, I tell them kindly, I'm busy that day, but I can help another time. No guilt, no long explanations, just honesty. And you know what? It works. People adjust when you stop bending yourself to fit every situation. If you're listening to this and you've ever skipped a doctor's appointment, delayed a test, or ignored a symptom because someone needed you, I understand. We were raised to be dependable. We were told that good mothers and grandmothers show up no matter what. But what nobody told us is that our bodies keep score. Every missed checkup, every late pill, every ignored ache, they all add up. Now, I keep all my appointments written down on the first page of my calendar. And when I cross them off, it feels like keeping a promise to the woman who still wants to live, not just exist. One small decision really can change everything. Last week, I walked down to the waterfront again, the same spot where I went after my appointment months ago. The water was calm, and the fairies were gliding in one after another. I had a small envelope in my hand, a thank you note for the young sitter who helped Roger that day, when I couldn't. I wanted her to know how much her being available allowed me to take care of myself. It reminded me that help doesn't always have to come from us. Sometimes letting others step in is the most generous thing we can do. I sat on a bench, watching the sunlight move across the water, and thought about how peace doesn't always come from quiet. It comes from balance. My health has been better since I started honoring my own time. My doctor said, "Keep doing whatever you're doing, Doris." I smiled and told her I started putting myself on my own priority list. She laughed and said that was her favorite prescription of the year. Roger's family is doing well. They found a sitter they trust, and I still see the grandkids every week, but on my schedule. When I visit, I enjoy it fully, not while worrying about what I gave up to be there. Sometimes Roger teases me, saying, "Mom's got boundaries now," and I tell him, "No, Mom's got balance." The truth is, boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges that make relationships stronger. When people know where you stand, they meet you there with respect instead of assumption. I've even started helping a few women from my church who are going through the same thing. Mothers who raised families that still rely on them too heavily. We meet once a week for tea and talk about how to say no without feeling guilty. It's funny how saying no can bring people together. If you're listening and you've been through something similar, maybe it's time to remind yourself that your life still belongs to you. Your health, your time, your rest, they're not luxuries. They're essentials. Sometimes I imagine my younger self sitting across from me now, her hands full of everyone else's needs. I'd reach across, take her hand, and tell her softly, "If you love someone, let them be responsible for their part. It's not less love, it's respect." I'd tell her not to wait until her heart gets tired or her body starts to complain. I'd tell her to take the appointment, take the walk, take the rest she needs. And most of all, I'd tell her this: when you finally start showing up for yourself, the world doesn't fall apart. It finally starts to fit together. Before I left the waterfront that day, I dropped that thank you note into the mailbox and stood for a moment, watching the ferry disappear into the mist. I felt proud of myself, not for doing something big, but for doing something consistent. Because the real change isn't in one grand decision. It's in the quiet, steady ones that follow. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. I hope something in it reminded you to put yourself first once in a while. You deserve that. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever canceled a medical appointment for family? How did it turn out? What did you learn from it? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I always read them. And if my story touched you in some way, please don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've got more to tell, real stories about life, love, family, and the lessons we learn when we finally slow down long enough to see what matters. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself. Truly take care of yourself, because no one can live your life better than you can. And remember, you are never too old to set new boundaries or start fresh. Lastly, remember to download this wonderful book called Healthy Boundaries After 60, How to Set Strong Boundaries, Saying No with Grace, Protecting Your Peace, and Strengthening Relationship with Your Children. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on Her Kindle Stories.